You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Heroku is a comprehensive cloud platform designed to help companies build, deliver, monitor, and scale apps. It's the fastest path to go from idea to app, enabling businesses to bypass the headaches typically associated with managing infrastructure.
Okay, today we're talking about TwelveFactor apps, and in particular, the open sourcing of TwelveFactor apps. For those developers and engineers in the audience, you're probably familiar with TwelveFactor apps. It started from one primary goal, isn't that right, Gail? You should be able to develop your app locally following your framework's documentation, and I'm reading this, of course, and deploy it to production without tailoring it in a specific form. And so what it really does is documents the common pitfalls. And now Heroku is like thinking about what's that next generation of it. And by doing that, you decide to open source it. And I'm joined by Gail Frederick, who's the CTO at Heroku Salesforce. Hey, Gail.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
that's the original purpose of TwelveFactor.
Yeah.
Being able to develop an app locally
Yep.
and package it portably across cloud providers, and then have it be able to run resiliently and have it be a delightful experience to build that.
How are you liking being CTO at Heroku? I mean, you've been at Salesforce for some time, haven't you?
I have. This is my second role at Salesforce. My first role was caring for Salesforce developer tools for the core Salesforce platform. I fell in love with Heroku. I mean, I'm a developer productivity nerd, I'm an API nerd, and I love building systems where developers can do what they need to do, get the value, and move on with their day. And that is what made me fall in love with Heroku, is it's just so darn productive. And we use a lot of words, opinionated, magical, to describe Heroku, but I think it's extremely productive, and that's why it's durable. And that's why I'm here. And also, I do enjoy nerds with a little dissent in them.
Yes.
And we have a stable of those at Heroku.
That's good. That's good. It also then, I think, must feel you much more committed and engaged then to the success of TwelveFactor, because it's part of the heart and soul of Heroku.
And Heroku has what I've described as citizen soldier engineers. Every engineer on my team is entrepreneurial, dedicated to the success of Heroku, and feels our principles deeply.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite parts about being the CTO of Heroku. And so every engineer embodies TwelveFactor and really has taken it into their heart and implements it in their work every day. And it's an incredible point of pride for me, and I'm so lucky to be leading this team.
Do you get that sense of the community who you're starting to meet in the TwelveFactor world?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, actually, especially of this initial crew of 12 maintainers. They do bring this dedication, and I'm really heartened and proud to see TwelveFactor really took hold, and it has influenced these folks who, and now they're at points in their careers where they're making decisions, across their whole platform with TwelveFactor in mind. Yeah, it's great. I'm incredibly proud, and I'm so thankful to Adam Wiggins.
So we were just chatting a little bit beforehand because I was reading TwelveFactor apps again. I read it many years ago. And what's striking is, it does need updating, doesn't it?
It does need updating. I mean, Adam Wiggins wrote TwelveFactor in 2011. And 13 years later, while the factors have inspired a generation of cloud developers, there are just some areas that are dated, and those are the ones that we're excited to update after the open source release.
So what are some of the particulars that you see need updating that come to mind first?
I see three main areas that we want to work with first. The manifesto talks about logs and treating logs as event streams.
Right.
And what's changed in cloud native development since then is developers need metrics, a wide variety of metrics coming out of their applications, not just textual logs or data format logs. So I think we're going to end up updating that factor specifically to translate to telemetry. and identifying best practices for what metrics your app should be emitting and then how you move them through into whatever visualization you want.
And telemetry is one of those topics that is getting particular notice because telemetry is everywhere, right? Now in microservices especially, and Internet of Things and edge computing and connected cars and the rest.
That's right. Developers need to know when they're running their apps, are there errors in the app? What's happening in the framework that the app is running in? What's happening in the operating system? How many resources am I consuming? What is the error rate of my application? Can I see if my users are satisfied? Telemetry can cover all of those areas.
So what changes with a community focus? It clearly then moves outside the domain of the organization, in this case Heroku, which have been helping, kind of harboring it, I guess.
That's right. Nurturing. We were nurturing it.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing and announcing this week at KubeCon is that we have released TwelveFactor principles as an open source project. It's in its own GitHub org outside of Heroku-owned open source code. And we started this open source release with a community of 12 maintainers coming from 6 different tech companies, and we're announcing it here, and we're inviting this community of cloud native developers to come and join us on this journey and help us as we review the factors and really think carefully about what are mindful updates we can make that are non-disruptive to the idea of best practices for cloud native app development, and then back that up with reference architectures and code examples.
I guess my first question is really, where do you start? It's an open source project, so people can make the contributions that they wish. They can make a pull request if they wish. But is there any thematic approach that you're hoping to take with the project itself?
Well, it's very early days.
Yeah.
What we've done so far amongst the maintainers is start with thorough discussions about the factors. And as we're listening from Heroku and Salesforce and Google Cloud and AWS, bringing in our experience running apps at scale for this past decade, really listening to what's working and what's not working for our customer bases and for us as infrastructure providers. So listening is really going to come first. And then we're going to coalesce what we think is important into revisions to the factors.
Has that process started?
It has. We've been working with this maintainer community for about 3 months since the summer.
What have you started to see?
The opinion I have about moving from logs to telemetry was very much informed from those conversations.
Okay.
We all also recognize that cloud native developers do not just deploy one app anymore. They deploy a system of apps together with multiple backing stores. And so TwelveFactor is pretty clear about one app with backing services and a data store. And that's not the reality for app developers in the cloud today. So that's 2 examples of this community, the maintainer community, coming together and creating an opening position as we ask for help from this community here at KubeCon.
Could there be more than 12 factors?
I think so. I mean, Heroku doesn't own TwelveFactor, so TwelveFactor will evolve with the community.
Right.
I have a personal opinion that 12 is a good number.
Well, it's a good number.
Yeah.
Could you lose 1 or 2 then along the way?
I think maybe one will change in its entirety.
Oh, the log one. Right?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I like 12. My opinion is we are feeling inspired by the past, but this is a community-driven process and it's open source, so we will see where the community takes it.
The ecosystem and community is relatively young in comparison to, you're looking to compare it to modern industry or agriculture, right?
That's right.
Practices have emerged over hundreds or thousands of years, right? So this is really just, but the beginning, but it really is almost a historical document, isn't it?
I think of it as a foundational document for the cloud.
Yeah.
And we see the durability of those principles.
Yeah.
And we are always at Heroku bumping into customers and partners who have been inspired by those principles when they're building in the cloud or even building on their own infra.
So what has aged well?
Environmental parity. So DevProd parity is one of the factors.
Okay.
I think that has aged very well as the idea that it's very important to have local development. It's very important as a cloud native developer to be able to work and run on an airplane, for example. I do that a lot, even if the thing that I deploy ends up in the cloud. Also, the idea of disposability, I believe, is essential for cloud native apps.
Isn't it?
Essential, yeah.
We still see that a lot now. The importance, I just related to discussions I've had over the past few years about ephemeral clusters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things disappearing.
Yeah, that's essential.
Yeah.
And I think it's also true that not all apps run in the cloud follow that principle of disposability, but when you do, you end up with something much more resilient and scalable.
So a lot of the work that you're doing now is staying true to the core themes and focus and values of the original 12-factor, but also considering the new technology patterns.
That's right. And I think focus is important. You asked this question of could there be more than 12? And my opinion as one of the opening maintainers is there must be 12 for that reason of focus.
Think
for focus reason.
Yeah.
We must, if contributors to the project would like to change a factor, I think we must find something that we want to remove to keep that balance.
But it could be like each factor could also, I guess, theoretically have articles, right?
You mean articles like the Constitution has amendments?
Yeah.
The thing that we have open sourced and are announcing at KubeCon is the 12-factor manifesto, the best practices. My expectation moving forward is that we will add supporting documents with details about how a factor might be implemented. We will offer reference architectures. We will provide code that is examples of a factor in action. And I even think of the Heroku platform as a reference architecture for all of the factors.
Right. So then that's an important point that I want to talk about, because since Heroku has, been nurturing 12-factor apps for all these years, how do you separate it out so there's that perception that you are open as everyone else is, but while also, having your own interests in developing Heroku, in new and exciting ways?
I think it's quite easy for us to separate those concerns. So 12-factor is an independent GitHub project. As I said, it's outside of the Heroku open source orgs. Our open source release contains a governance document that details how to become a maintainer, how we make decisions. The maintainer community today is already a majority. There are three of 12 maintainers are Heroku or Salesforce. So 9 of 12 are external.
Okay.
I think it's very important for us to be Heroku to be on a level playing field with every other maintainer involved in the project.
With 12-factor, over the years, the people who've been applying it, how would you describe them? How would you characterize that persona?
They are app developers. They are sysadmins, DevOps engineers. They are security engineers. I think the people who are drawn to 12-factor they have dedicated their careers to making cloud computing work. They are also platform developers. So again, if I look to my own company, Heroku, I would say every engineer in my team who is developing some part of the Heroku platform is building it both inspired by the factors and in order to deliver a developer experience that implements the factors to our customers. Mm-hmm. And you can say that about other cloud infrastructure providers. So platform developers are a key constituency, as well as those customers who want to run apps at scale and want to have a delightful, repeatable way of building them.
What do you expect the contributions will look like? Will they be because I'm thinking, I think of open source projects as code. You contribute code. What do you expect people will be contributing, or what are you seeing people contributing already?
Well, right now, it's a document, and the document is licensed under Creative Commons, as are most open source pros.
Right.
So that's where we'll start, because that's what we have. My expectation is more documents will come in, documents describing what an ideal implementation of a factor looks like, or going into more detail. And so if we go back to the example of telemetry, I think there's a lot to say about what telemetry is, how you should emit metrics out of an app, ways to observe those metrics and gain insights into your app. And then I am expecting contributors to contribute code. And I think this is really important, because customers and developers need examples of what the factors look like in action.
So those will be in forms of documentation, maybe, for instance, a developer who's built out a SaaS platform or has been involved in building out a SaaS platform, and they have some learnings from, that development process.
I think it could be simpler than that. I think it could even be a reference app, a sample app, with an elegant implementation of metrics being emitted through OTel, for example, demonstrating that a wide variety of metrics can be emitted out of an app, and then providing choice in observability of those metrics. I don't think it needs to be, here's an example of a platform like Heroku implementing those factors. I think we can start with very simple examples. If I'm bootstrapping an app, a TwelveFactor app, what does disposability mean in practice, for example?
Yeah.
So what do I use to store data if I am creating a disposable app?
Why are you doing this now? What is the impetus for it today?
Well, Heroku is developing the next generation of our platform, and we have been touching most of the systems that comprise Heroku. And so it's a natural time for us, as we are moving forward in our evolution, to be both looking at what our customers are doing in detail and looking at the design of our platform and thinking about how are we implementing TwelveFactor, and where are we seeing our customers move, and where does our platform need to move? And I think the logs to telemetry is a great example of that. Heroku has fantastic log drains. They're amazing, they're insufficient. And so one thing that we're delivering in our new platform, for example, is OTel for all of our customers.
You are OTel, okay.
And in fact, we have a talk here at KubeCon where we are talking about how we made that transition in our own platform.
Interesting. Tell me then about, how you perceive the user base and who you want to attract. Open source projects have, pretty standard hierarchies, right? And there are sometimes concerns that not people are well represented. How do you think about, developing a diversity of users so the services that people are developing are reflective of the community?
I think you mean the global community of software developers and infrastructure developers.
And how are you going to what are the themes you're going to try to develop with the values from the open source project, so you get a diverse group of people who are contributing back to it.
Sure.
So it's reflective of the community.
We are in the middle of a highly diverse event right now. I always get excited when I come to KubeCon and I see people from countries around the world, people whose job function is highly diverse. And that's an important reason about why we're announcing here, to take advantage of this community. I do think that TwelveFactor has inspired a generation of app developers to build apps in a simple and repeatable way.
Right.
I think in practice, we are going to start with contributions from people who are deeply involved in building these cloud platforms, deeply involved in understanding what's new, what features need to go in a platform in order to attract the next generation of customers.
So you were mentioning that you're building the next generation of Heroku. Can you talk a little bit about that? For people who are needing a refresher perhaps? Like what was the previous generation of Heroku?
Sure. The Heroku platform predates most cloud standards.
Yeah.
So when we built it, it was groundbreaking. And so we have seen this amazing community grow up behind Kubernetes. And we are rebasing our platform on Kubernetes. We announced that in February at KubeCon in Paris. And that brings a ton of end user benefit to our customers, including performance and scalability and security.
And going back to 12-factor overall, like there's, when 12-factor was developed, cutting edge was different than what cutting edge is today, right?
That's right. Yeah.
In those years, we've seen the emergence of serverless architectures, for example, Kubernetes, for example, right? How are you going to be including the vision for the role of 12-factor in those emerging architectural patterns?
Sure. We have a maintainer who said the other day that one can think of serverless as extreme 12-factor. And I think that's really right. That's percolating through my brain. I appreciate that more and more. Definitely we need
because in the architecture itself of serverless technologies encompasses 12-factor?
Because you see extreme disposability, for example, because it's not a long-lived service.
Right.
Yeah. I think our work is sufficient in refreshing 12-factor only if we are incorporating app development use cases that include the edge, that include IoT, that include serverless, and even that include heavyweight distributed systems that you wouldn't think of as being cloud native.
There's a lot more data now today too. We see data emerging in all kinds of forms. Training models are built on data, right? How do those emerging technologies factor into 12-factor?
Data, and I think you might also be asking about AI techniques. That's an area I think we really need to explore with the maintainers. 12-factor today doesn't adequately cover the use cases around AI and around data. And so I know that the early maintainer group and folks who are just joining the project bring a ton of experience in those areas. And I'm so excited to learn from them.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin with that, because the patterns are so new.
That's right.
And the documentation is just emerging.
That's right. I mean, a point of view from Heroku is AI apps are also just apps.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. They are calling out to inferencing, or they may be running some on their own.
They have APIs.
But there is an awful lot of room in the industry for AI apps that are just apps that are employing an AI technique through an API, for example. And that, I think, appeals to this broad developer community.
Gail, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me. I just have one last question before we go. Did you notice Betty doing selfies in behind us? It was just so classic. Betty Janot is over there doing selfies.
I did not know. Listen, thank you so much, Alex, for having me. I really appreciate talking to you. I did not know that Betty Janot is doing selfies behind us. That's fantastic.
Thanks so much, Gail.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.